Hello everybody and welcome to another video on the intermediate React version 5 here. This is just a series of videos that I'm taking from the course taught by Brian Holt, a software engineer with over over a decade working as a software engineer in companies like Microsoft, Reddit, Netflix, and Snowflake. He's currently the PM of Snowflake, and now he's the host of this series of videos from Front End Master. So because I already received a flag from Front End Master when they say me, hey, you can learn from this video, but you can record yourself while learning. All right. So all right. Because of that, I'm just only gonna take some notes from that course, and yeah, and because of that, I'll need to actually separate even the audio, so I cannot even record the audio there, but I can record myself while learning from this course. And that's exactly what I'm gonna do. All right. Okay. Okie dokie. So again, this is a series of videos that I'm going to take some notes, verbalize, improve my communication skills, which is something that I invite you to do that. Whatever thing you're learning digitally, okay? And of course, it's something that is on demand or is something that you need to learn not only in your work, but perhaps in your daily life. Let's say you need to actually learn something and try to, let's say you need to learn something that is in another language. So this is something very, very helpful. So the more you're exposed, the more you practice to learn that thing that you need, not only on your profession, but also besides that, that actually will improve your soft skills, your thinking process, and now you're gonna hear me very, very poorly. Yeah, but at least you can hear me. All right. So here we are. So the goal of this course is just to learn how to write production-ready applications using React. Okay. So we're going to learn is the tools and the techniques that allow us to do this. So these techniques and tools that we can learn is, so for example, in the case of techniques, code splitting, server-side rendering, testing, and transition. In the case of transition, I'm quite familiar to this. And then I look at the tools that allow us to build these production-ready apps. And that is Tailwinds, TypeScript, as well as Redux. So Tailwinds is this library that allows us to build and work with CSS much more easy, because maintaining HTML is much more easy than CSS. TypeScript will allow us to help build applications and help us with the correctness of our code. Okay. And Redux, as a way to keep track, is the state change, the data change. So how you can actually keep track of when a particular event or a UI element changed, and now you have a deterministic way to look at those changes. And that's right. Okay, so the course overview here is about the hooks in depth, and then we're going to look at tailwinds, so advanced React techniques or advanced React performance, low priority re-rendering, okay, TypeScript, Redux, and testing. So that's good because it's a mix, it's a mix between these advanced techniques and tools. Okay, so today's video is all about the advanced React performance. I'm gonna walk through this briefly just to recap, and then jump to the topic that really mattered for us. So hooks in depth. Brian Hall show us is from the React docs that are the most common hooks that we can use, especially from these advanced topics or for building these production ready apps. So we have is the use ref. Okay, it's a way to hold is a reference from this elements or from this piece of code that we want to later on use it. Use ref. I also look at use reducer. That is just a fancy name to say, hey, this is a function that receives an state and an actions and generate a new bit of state. With the use of switch, it allows us to create this a new object by using object.assign. The TLDR of that is because using this particular model way of doing things give much more predictability and is way much more easy to maintain and debug. It also follows the functional programming where they say, hey, it'll be much more easy anytime you change an state. So instead of mutate the current objects and without causing cascade effects through your app, so let's go to generate a new state of that where you can work with. And if you want a new state, do that again and again and again. All right. So that's the idea here. I also look at the use callback and use memo. These are intended for avoiding re-rendering components. Okay. So use callbacks and use memo is remember premature optimizations can be the root of all evil, and you should only rely on this if you have performance optimization. This is something that I look at, for example, React Native apps. Okay, so the idea here is that each one of them can be used interchangeably. And this something comes first after this, and the idea here is to understand that's all different. Okay, so this is for skipping expensive computing, skipping expensive recomputations or recalculations. It also skipping is re-rendering components. You can memorize functions with this. Memorize is just when you have a functions that you know the output based on an input. So instead of actually compute that again, it's going to store that, and any time we have the same input, we're gonna give you the outcome for that. A good example of this is, well, what is the first and odd numbers? What is the first 5 and odd numbers? And you may wonder, why do I need to learn to know about this? Again, if you're trying to do a computation here, the idea here is to calculate just once and store the output. So anytime you receive that input, you're gonna straight out the results. So for example, in the case of what is the first and odd numbers, for example, the first 5 odd numbers, well, instead of calculating that 1 plus 3 plus 5 plus 7 plus 9, you already have a formula that does that for you, an equation, which is great, that say, hey, anytime you find this problem, this is how you can solve it. And that is n power 2, which is what is the number, the amount of number that you want to calculate, 5, and then you're going to elevate 2. In this case, it's 25. So next time, you don't need to actually do anything that I mentioned before. You just do 25. Another good example is like, what is 7 times 7? Well, it is 49. So instead of actually you have to recompute that or even to think about it, you already stored a value, okay, based on an input, which is what is 7 by 7. You already have that, 49, you give the result. So the whole point of this is to shrink the amount of time that we have to dedicate to a particular calculation. That's the whole idea of the memorize. And also as a software engineering, this is also one of the challenge and one of the assets that as a software engineer you own, and not only as a software engineer but also as a person. Okay, that's the best asset that a person can have, time. All right, so that's the use callback and use memo, and then we also look at the use layout and use ID. Use layout is, for example, for re-rendering. The problem is that because use effects, it re-render right after the function, in this case right after the render functions is called. It doesn't wait for the render or it doesn't wait for that change to be reflected on the screen. So use layout allows to do that by saying, hey, I'm gonna trigger is a particular function after this state has been repainted, or after the render function has been after the render functions ends. So use effects, sorry, yeah, so you can as you can remember, use effect happens immediately after a renders ends. So sometimes you don't want to do that. Sometimes it's, for example, a use case for that is when you are resizing elements for this, and you don't want to actually call that function every time you actually trigger that event, which is the resizing elements. So you're going to wait until the element is done, or after the user end up to re-render or to resize the element. Okay, so the TLDR of the use layout is that unless you are actually letting the users to render or unless you're letting the users to dynamically change the layout here, that's what they use here, use layout. This is what you want to. This is what you want to use. Okay. And the other is a use ID. So use ID is not for using on the list. Okay. The use ID. And they have the use ID more for forms. All right. And that'll be all at least for the hooks in depth. Use ref, use ref, use reducer, use ref, use reducer, use callback and memo, as well as use layout and use ID. And then we look at tailwinds. So to put it short here, tailwinds is this way to style your applications. So unlike so you also have another applications and frameworks like frameworks like style components, emotions, and CSS models. Okay, where you actually have truly CSS scope. The reality is that Tailwind has been adopted by a lot of the people in the community, the React community, and the way how this works is by adding all of these tiny little class to your HTML elements, making it much more easy to understand, and also letting the compiler to analyze all of this and create the applications with a very minimalistic style sheets. Okay, the trade-off is, well, now this your HTML elements will look very verbose. It can look like very verbose. So there's a couple of things. There's a couple of questions here when they say, "Hey, what is the difference between Tailwinds and Bootstrap and Material UI?" Is that Material UI and Bootstrap, they are both UI design systems, meaning that if you build a web app using each one of them, for example, Bootstrap, it will look like a Bootstrap app. So this is good for internal web apps, but for anything else. And for internal web apps, when you don't really care about how it looks like, as you don't really care the look and feel of that, as long as it looks nice. Okay, so with Tailwind, it allows you to define. With Tailwind, help you is to write CSS styles. It doesn't tell you how your components will look like. So, and this is something that they mention in their docs. And I don't throwing any shadow, I'm not throwing any shade where they don't throw it at themselves. So here we are. We'll look at how we can use Tailwind here. So you have the compiler, which is Tailwind, like this. Okay, you also have the transpiler, like Post CSS. It's pretty much like Babel, that allows you to use the new CSS features on CSS, and the auto prefixer, that, as their name suggests, is provide you this all of convenience class to auto prefix for several browser vendors. So as I mentioned here, what is the difference between Tailwind and Bootstrap is that, and then we look at how we install the Tailwinds, the composition there, how the things will look like. All right, and yeah, styling with CSS and adding CSS here. So that's a thing of styling here is something that I didn't go through that because I'm quite familiar with. Adding CSS Tailwind plugins, so for example, like Form, they can give you is the base. All right, and also how you can extend the Tailwinds. So by looking at the Tailwinds entry point, the CSS entry point, right, or the style CSS, you're going to now extend by including Tailwind's base CSS. This is when you have, for example, hey, let me reserve how the unordered list will look like, how the anchor component will look like. The components where you say, okay, this is how things start. It's going to basics styles for your components, and then your utility. So convenience, like convenience CSS, for example, hey, how this is going to look like, how the anchor is going to look like. Again, the idea of this is that, what? Okay, so the idea of using Tailwind is that this is something that is way much more maintainable, because maintaining HTML elements is much more scalable than a huge CSS global file. All right, especially if you have to collaborate with a lot of team members. So then I also look at how can I use the layout with CSS. This is pretty much like, say, hey, you can add is grid and mobile endpoints on how this thing is gonna look like, which is tremendous helpful. It is one of the things that I love from TypeScript. All right, so that was Tailwind, not TypeScript. That was Tailwinds. Okay, what is Tailwinds? What is the subtle difference between other frameworks? How you can start using Tailwinds? Install what is the anatomy of Tailwind, as well as how you can now style in your application with that, how you can extend that, how you can define layouts with that, and breakpoints. Shout out to Tailwind. And finally, the advanced React performance here. So far, we're going now to move on to code splitting, and this is something that Brian Hall mentioned, okay, which is a specific React performance. Remember that after all, React is all about rendering components. Okay, so far so good, no problem. It's all about rendering components. That's the value proposition, or that's what React is doing. Okay, that's what React does. And then we're gonna see now is specific React performance. So we have to do code splitting first and server-side rendering. So this is an exciting thing from Brian Hall, because he used to do separately the code splitting and server-side rendering. And now they are used to not play very well together. So finally, with React version 18, they made them play well together, which he is very happy about it. Code splitting and server-side rendering. Remember, after all, they are advanced React performance. Okay, advanced React performance. So first things first is this. So the React DOM version 18 by itself, the DOM, only the DOM, it weighs 42 kilobytes. How you know that? It's like bundle phobia. I think I wrote it wrong. Yeah, bundle phobia. So bundle phobia say, hey, what is the React DOM actually weighs? The React DOM. No, it's not. React DOM here. There you got it. It's a version 18 exactly. So the React DOM weighs 41.9, roughly 42 kilobytes. So now they've reduced the bundle. Interesting. It's about 42 kilobytes. Only the React DOM. Okay. You want to see something more interesting? React by itself, the library, this developer API, this only weighs 2.5 kilobytes. So imagine here, okay, now if you want to make your initial load 100 kilobytes, then you need to do code splitting. You may wonder, why do I need to make this initial code, or why do I need to make the initial load 100 kilobytes? Okay, because the value proposition of of the code splitting, or the reason we are actually going to this, is by saying, hey, we would like to use this. We would like is to improve the user experience. We would like that you and I, every time you access to any of these social media accounts or Google or any website, e-commerce, Amazon, we want us to do that straightforward. And that's great. That's interesting, because that not only is going to improve the user experience, but also the the user retention and the user conversion, which leads to more sales. So as long as you provide is a good experience and a good product, that's one of the reasons why we are focused here on reducing the initial load. And because of that, this is one of the advanced topics or advanced techniques in React. So it makes sense. It makes sense a lot. Okay. You may wonder, is like, why do I need to improve this problem? Because this is something that I don't own this. You can try by building your own products, which is something that you can encourage. What I would like to encourage, but the reality is that, yeah, whether you're building a product or not, okay, these advanced techniques will help you to improve the user experience, user retention, and ultimately user conversion. So they can now purchase your products for that. So as long as you provide a good user experience and a good product, so people will be able and willing to pay for that. So when you go to a barber shop, make a quick tangent here. When you go to a barber shop and that kind of places, it's like, yeah, you actually, or in my case, I actually pay for the value, for the service that I'm receiving from there, and I really love it. Totally. And I really love it. Yep, and I really love it. Totally. So this is the idea behind the code splitting. In code splitting and server-side rendering was something that or are used to not play well together. Okay, but now with React version 18, they play well together. So, and the idea here is to say, hey, this is how much this thing weighs, as well as, for example, the React DOM and the React, and also if you need to, for example, set the initial load to a particular budget, okay, it is important to do code splitting. It is important to only serve is the things that are needed on the initial page. That's what we have is here the LCP and the web vitals. Okay, so a couple of metrics that people at the Google they identified to improve their user experience in order to improve the customer retention and customer conversion. So okay, never forget that this is a business. And that you're doing is just providing tools and helping business to meet their goals. All right. So that's the idea behind this. That's the value proposition here with code splitting, right? So code splitting, the idea is that you're going to load is the bare minimum necessary code, okay, to teach your app that you get up and running so the user sees something immediately. This is just a fancy way to say, hey, code splitting is all about that you're going to load, so the idea of code splitting is that you're going to load the bare minimum necessary code instruction. You're gonna load the bare minimum necessary code to teach your app, to teach your app to get up and running, so users see something in the background. And I think this is something lovely when he mentioned this. Why? Because this is what is truly happening behind the scenes. Okay? So by only sending the bare minimum necessary instructions from the server to the client, okay, so you're gonna pass through a lot of layers in that, and to make things simple here, and just a quick recap here for those who are familiar with the computer software. Okay, so you have another server that perhaps have a different architecture, a different computing system, mainframe. It can be a mainframe, it can be a mini computer, it can be a mainframe, supercomputer, mini computer, microcomputer, PC, server. Okay, what it means is that another computer, okay, it can have different software, or it can be, it have a different configuration of software, hardware, and peripherals. Right? It's another computer. You don't know what it is, but you want to communicate to that. You want to, for any reason, hey, I would like to look at your website, at your e-commerce, for example. All right? So to do that and to communicate with different specimens here, there is a standard that allows this interconnection across different computer systems, and that's called is the OC model. Okay, which is an open system intercommunication. Okay, there you go in English. Open system interconnection or intercommunication. Okay, so the idea here is that because you want to access to Amazon to buy the 7-Eleven, does 7-Eleven has like that? Or Chipotle, okay, Chipotle, okay, you got Chipotle here. So in order to access to Chipotle here, log. So in order to go to Chipotle application, and you can see their website, what's going on is that they host on their computer somewhere geographically, most likely in the US and the kind of thing. Oh my God, those images are very, very good. Yeah, good job. Design team, photography team, good job. Good job. Anyway, so because of that, you want to access to those computers, and the way to do that is through this model. And this is a standard. When this standard was developed, oh, that makes sense. Started in the late 70s to support the emergence of the diverse computer networking methods that were competing for application in large national networking effort in the world. See OSI protocols and protocol wars. Holy moly. The protocol war. The first two packet switching network for computer to computer communication. The NPL, a datagram service, and the ARPANET network, virtual circuits. Holy moly. Robert, you are the, oh my God. He conceived a packet switching, oh my God. Donald Davis and George Ken, Robert Ken. Of course, my friend. Of course, my friend. God damn. Of course, my friend. While working on SatNet, Satellite Package Network Project, he came up with the initial idea of what later became the Transmission Control Protocol. Oh my God. Which is the core of how you can communicate and also to troubleshooting networks, which is very, very, very important. Not only for web developers, React developers, but also for network people. Okay, so for server people and for server people. That makes a lot of sense. Which was intended to replace for an early network protocol NCP used in the ARPA. TCP plays a major role in forming the basis of open architecture. So this particular protocol, and that's another. This is something that you barely hear about. Is there any? Oh my God! Is there any documentary about it? So Protocol Wars documentary. Protocol Wars documentary. Mm. Netflix, Social Dilemma. Yeah. Yeah, that's something interesting. That might go beyond the scope of this course, but in any case, it's very, very important to make a quick recap. Okay, so let's say you want to actually is get in here and buy something on Chipotle, all right, or any of this e-commerce. So Chipotle has this is host on another computer. Whatever the type of computer can be, okay, we need to find a way to communicate these two different specimens. You know, we need to find a way to make Bob communicate to Alice. All right. So the way to do that is by creating this standard, a standard that was developed late in the 70s, the OC model, as a way to say, I don't care which one of computer system you are, I don't care your configuration, how special you think you are, okay? And I'm gonna get canceled by that. So I don't care how special is your computer system, we need to find a way to exchange packages, exchange content, data. So the way to do this is, well, through the OC model, all right? So through the application. So the thing here is that your computer actually send a request to that. It will pass through all of those layers, the application, the application, the season, then the transport, which is the TCP protocol, where they say, hey, I'm gonna get this data and going to send that to another computer, okay? And I'm going to establish here is a handshake, because this is a way how I can establish a connection, a connection oriented between two servers, two computers, okay? And I need to send some instructions to see if there is someone in the other side, okay? Cincinnati act, all right? If that everything went well, now it's going to the lower level, which is the internet, the data layer, and the physical one. So all of this is anytime you actually hit here on the internet, and then you pass down through that. All right. So you send the request to their server. They receive that through their Ethernet ports, through the through their Ethernet ports, and they pass it to the data layer, to the internet, and to the transport layer. Season up to they reach to the application server, to the server layer. When they receive that request and they say, someone wants to access to this resource, okay, can we send that? Yes. All right, do that again. So you pass through the OC models, send that, I receive that, the browser receives that data, and here we are. We now are able to see this fantastic web app and all the different the layout and photos and videos that are very, very tasty, again with the sole purpose to improve from the business model, improve the user retention and customer conversion and user conversion. So all right, that explained a lot. So because of that, now that I went through this and understanding the value proposition of code splitting is like that. I want now, especially if I set an initial load, an initial budget, I want now as the server send only the necessary instructions, sends only the bare minimum necessary instructions to teach the app to get up and running so users can see something. So you need some sort of a strategy here that split that out. Luckily for us, React and Vite plays well. React and Vite plays really well to make that happen for you, to make that code splitting strategy works like charm. So by the way, I'm not implying that you have to I'm not implying that you have to have a code budget of 100 kilobytes, but you should to have a code budget something like that in your application, something that they mention here. Okay, so something you try to stay under or perform timing you're trying to hit. Okay, you should be thinking what will be reasonable amount of time that it takes me for my app to load in front of the user. The whole point of this is to you need to have is a rendering strategy. Luckily for us, Vite and React plays well together, so they do that. And also you have to know is a code budget. That doesn't mean that it have to be 100 kilobytes, but the idea here is to have something that you want to try to stay under, or performance timing you try to hit, okay, or something you want to stay under, or performance timing you want to hit. So it is different per apps. For example, if you're writing code, for example, like your helicopter, and this is a good example here. And the reason why you might want to use code splitting, I already explained that with Chipotle, but he mentioned that, for example, if you are writing code for your helicopter, so their audience, which is discontinued, they probably have a nice phone and a decent connection. You can probably have a pretty high performance budget in there. But for example, if you are writing something that keep tracks, if you are writing something that keep tracks of a farmer, or in this case of any of the field service management, for example, truck drivers, and if in my particular case like that, okay. So if you're writing something that keep track of farmer that's watering their crops or that keep tracking is hauling service. So driver needs to move some load from point A from point B, from a well, from a well to a side water disposal. Then and they have a terrible 2G connections. That's something rural in the South Dakota or in Oklahoma, and they are out there in the boonies. So you want to, so performance budget is very sensitive here. So things like this becomes very helpful. Okay, and now you understand why is this. So things like this becomes very helpful to have in your React application. So what we're going to do is to split things out of the main package, and the way to do this is by using is the lazy component here. Yeah, so the lazy component here. So the lazy say, hey, you know what? All right, now I'm going to instruct that React that anytime that this render React components are not going to render initially, all right? I'm just going to have those reference, all right? I'm just going to have those reference like so, and then you have to wrap on the suspend. You're just gonna have those reference, and I'm gonna load that. Okay. So the question here is that how is this loaded? Okay, how these things is how exactly, and how now React know that you shouldn't load this. All right, it can be quite hard to understand what is this because how Vite works in depth. So the way Vite works is actually using the browser built-in models loaders for all your local servers thin. So the chunk business is coming from React. Okay, exactly. So the chunk business is coming from React. So when you're loading this in production, it is loading chunk of that. So what's really cool about this is now we can load the detail page only when it is required, which has not been yet loaded. So all of this, the thing that by using is the lazy, and then wrap them using a suspend, which is say when something you wanna anytime anything that you're gonna load later. But what happened exactly? Anything that you want to load later, you can use this as suspend here. Okay. So basically, here suspend is what it's doing is it's going to show up something in the render tree until the fallback has returned. Okay. Okay. So show the fallback here until the suspend has returned, until we get something here. This is just explaining is about what you can show, especially where you're loading or where you're doing this lazy loading, where you're. My question is, that's great, that's good, but how this is going? How does it work? You know, how actually the browser or the server knows that this particular chunk is not going to be loaded. All right, and when to load this particular code, because we are not telling it explicitly here. It's React that is doing all of these things for us. Again, thing to understand here is that code splitting is not a silver bullet. You need to actually measure when it makes sense to improve the user experience here. It's not always necessary to do code splitting. And it's important when you're going to put lazy loading as well. Because if you have a big app, you need to do code splitting to get decent performance. And this is something interesting because it explained that this code splitting stuff is like playing the shell game. Okay, if you move something to make it the initial paint faster, if you move something, if I move something to make the initial page load faster, then I'm making my time deck interactive worse. The shell game. The shell game. That's why interesting, bro. The shell game. The shell game. The shell game. So here, code optimism or code splitting. Okay, so let me now organize my thoughts a little bit here. So first, we talk about code splitting. What is code splitting? In something that this is part of the advanced techniques, like code splitting and server-side rendering. What is the main goal of this? Is to make the initial load faster as a way to improve the user experience, customer retention and conversions. And how that happened at a technical level, I described that. How that happened at a technical level. And not only that, how can we implement this code splitting in React using lazy? How we can actually is show something when you are when you defer things or when you want to load some things later on. Okay, that's one. And the other, and the other is that recognize that depend on your application, code splitting might works or not depend on the case. So if you're doing a lot of code splitting for all of your components, that will increase unnecessarily the amount of requests you have to hit the server, and that's not ideal. It will slow down. Again, the key here is balance. Find which page, which site needs to actually improve the user experience, and then from there you can measure. It is also important to have a code splitting strategy. Luckily for us, React already do that with Vite. Okay, when they create this chunk with a hash, this is React code splitting. The chunk is the code splitting business. And the question is that, okay, so now that I know what code splitting is, how code splitting work, what is the value proposition of code splitting, then I look at some recommendation of use code splitting. I don't know truly how the code splitting I don't know how the code splitting actually is storing all of this reference, storing all of this. I don't know how code splitting actually works behind the scenes, more than letting the React do its magic. And so the point here is that now I want to know how does it do that. Okay, which is the suspense exactly, and this is that you want to add that, right? So the question is that how suspense knows when to load things in the background, or how React, because it's this, Lazy will only call back functions once it tried to be rendered. Suspend will catch that and pause and will be loading the dynamic import in the background. Exactly. Suspend will call that, pause the loading the dynamic import in the background. And another valid question is, can we be optimistic about it? Can we load stuff in the background? The answer is yes. Yeah, the answer is yes. You definitely can, and we are now adding another factor of complexity by doing that. You know, okay, can I load stuff in the background? Okay, because after all, when you're doing this code splitting, and then you let the React actually figuring out when to fetch this, which is when to fetch this particularly React component or resource in the background, how it actually work, how this loading, how is this things happening behind the scenes, how React know when to load this things in the background. What is this things in the back? How is this things in the background know when to load this thing? Okay, can we be optimistic about it? Can we load stuff in the background? The answer is definitely yes, but this add another factors of complexity. The best way I find you to do that is by using service worker. So service worker is going to load things in the background. Now we enter here in another realm, okay, in the realms of loading things in the background in the browser. So letting now the browser to say, hey, I'm gonna load this asset or this resource, not right now, not initially, only when the user needs it, when you interact with it, when I tell you. If you're not familiar with service worker, it's basically saying you have your application and your API. Okay, a service worker sits in the middle. Okay, so anytime your application make requests to your API, okay, so the service worker sit in the middle between your application and your API. So anytime your service work or anytime you send a request to your API, it goes through the service worker out of the API, and that's how service worker do. So the way you can have the service worker is that once your app is loaded, because I don't know if this is the mechanism of doing this. So the way of you can have your service worker is that once your app is loaded, it says the user is trying to load the model. Yeah, the way you can have your service worker is that once your app is loaded, it says the user is trying to load a model, or this lazy loading component might try to load details, so they basically grab all of the features in the background. So whenever we request something, the service worker say, guess what, I already have it, and I'm gonna talk to the API, now here you go. So the whole point of this is that the service worker is the mechanism, is what it actually allows to run things in the background. And in this particular case is to store things, to run things in the background, to check things in the background. So because the service worker sits at the middle of your application request and your API, it makes a lot of sense. So by having it a service worker, you serve those requests as if they were happening instantaneously, as long as you have that already cached. So service worker, the user never knows, and you don't have to write your code differently. The service worker can handle all of that. How do you do that? So you have Vite, Parser, or Webpack. This dev server or model bundlers or any model bundlers generating a manifest of all of that chunk. That makes a lot of sense. Okay. Oh, all right. That's the missing piece here. That was a missing piece. Okay, so is any of these model bundlers that actually are going to generate this set of instruction or this manifest to the service worker that say, hey, service worker, this is the manifest, this is the set of instruction that I as a model bundler generated based on the author, the React or Angular or Vite. So based on the React author, okay, that say this particular resource is going to be lazy loaded. It's going to load later. That. So that instruction is going to pass through the model bundlers, and then the model bundlers generate is the manifest that is used by the service worker to say, hey, okay, let me take a look at this list. So we got a model that I'm going to load later. I'm going to load later the detail page as well as other things. That makes a lot of sense, man. That makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense. So the service worker, once it's loaded in your app, so once it's loaded and your app is loaded, okay, it's important. So once the service worker is loaded and your app is loaded, you can look at the manifest, or in this case, the service worker what is doing this, the service worker can look at the manifest and say, okay, get me all of this chunk, and they will do that for you. Something like Remix actually do that for you. Another model bundlers, but again, it's this model bundlers that communicates, and model bundlers like Vite or Parcel or Webpack, okay, that communicates to, or that they generate, exactly, that they generate this manifest to the service worker that allows to run this task in the background. Tasks that can be used to say, for code splitting. To say, hey, I want you to fetch me this resource on demand or when it's needed. Okay, but again, this something like Remix actually do that for you. They kind of take care of that entire architecture for you if you do it correctly. But you can do it for yourself. All right. And I get it, bro. That's a very, 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 very interesting. Oh my God. It's a very, very, very interesting things to recap about this. Holy moly. Advanced React Performance. Go to, oh my God. Okay. Jesus.
We are going to move on if you do it correctly, but it is possible to do yourself.
Mm-hmm. 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 That makes a lot of sense. Mm-hmm.
Hi, my name is Kent C. Dodds, and I'm an educator teaching topics around React, testing, and the web. After rebuilding my personal website with Remix, I got so excited about what it enabled me to do, and I'm thrilled to be able to share that with you. In this course, we're going to cover conventional
makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. All right. Oh my God, that was quite illustrative. That was quite illustrative. Yeah, bro. Yeah, bro. Oh my God, that was quite illustrative. Okay. All right. Okay. What's next, bro? What's next? Because okay, yep, it actually answered my questions. It actually answered my questions. So what is code splitting? Yeah, what is code splitting? What is the value proposition of code splitting? This is part of these advanced techniques, especially on React, when you want to build its production grade React apps. And these techniques is for ensuring the best user experience to the best user experience for user retention and conversions, that by shrinking or by putting a limit of the initial load, you can do that. And this initial load is a budget that you must have. You must define that with your team or for yourself. You must have that budget to say, hey, this is the limit this is the performance timing we're trying to hit, or this is what we want to stay under that. Okay. All right. Mm-hmm. Oh, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And not only that, it's like, okay, so now that you know what is the goal of this, of the code splitting, how you can use it, and how you can implement that. In the case of React, is by using the lazy function that they come with the React package, okay, where you can indicate, hey, which one of these components you would like to render later. And we use also suspense as a way to say, hey, this is what you're going to show during this lazy loading, during when things happens, or when we are loading things later on. So with that, the chunk strategy or the code splitting strategy, luckily for us, is something that is being done by Vite or any of these model bundlers. Okay, so this is the way how this works is by generating is a chunk of a file that, again, this is something that is generated by this one of these model bundlers. And you might wonder, so this is what is going to generate it, okay, by these model bundlers. How they know when do they need to fetch those bundlers, those reaches, you know? That's a good question, because that lead us to look a way on the browser to say who can actually, or which features is capable to dealing with background tasks, okay, to actually have a record of this resource that we want to load later. Who is actually who can help us to do this? Oh, service workers. And there's the chat. And this service worker, because it's on the browser, it say, hey, I'm gonna sit in the middle between your application's requests and your API, and I'm gonna check if you actually are making a request, or if you already have a if we already have those resources for you. Okay, so before doing this HTTP request, here I'm gonna say, hey, but I already have this. Okay, for example, on the initial load, If this is the second time, hey, I already have these assets, so take it. You don't need to actually wait for the server to reply. Here, take it instantaneously. And if it's not, then he's going to perform the HTTP request. So you may wonder, okay, but the great thing of this is that you don't have to change your code differently, because those model bundlers are actually generating is a manifest that service worker use to say, okay, this is the resource that I need to take a look at, or this is the resource that I going to lazy loading, or any of this configuration here. You can build your own solutions, and this will also change the architecture of your application. So Remix actually is helping, or Remix can help you with this. And the question is now, all right, so what will be, yeah, because the question is like, how can we know more about the service worker?
as well.
Because the service worker is, in my case, is going to help the company that I work with to say, hey, you know what? This will allow us to handle async operation. This will allow us is to handling yeah, when there is a loss of connection, in remote areas, okay, somewhere out there in the boonies, so in remote area, it will allow us to sync our device.
Hopefully you can see why I'm not teaching that today. It's like another half hour that we'd be going over setting over service workers, and this is not a class on service workers. So, is there a class on service workers, Mark?
Service worker. Worker at yeah, there is a class for service worker at front end master. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, that was quite interesting, bro. Totally, bro. So,
we actually have two. We have one on progressive web apps with Maximiliano Bertman.
Okay, that'd be a good one.
And we also have a deep dive on service worker with Kyle Simpson.
Deep dive. Oh my god. Okay. PWA service worker at front end master, and then a deep dive service worker with
On progressive web apps with Maximiliano Furtman.
Okay, that'd be a good one.
And we also have a deep dive on Service Worker with Kyle Simpson.
Kyle Simpson. Okay. With Kyle Simpson. Mm-hmm. Damn son. BWA service worker, and then you have his service deep dive service worker with Kyle Simpson. Mm-hmm. I think this is something that we're gonna use. Mm-hmm. Especially for those field service managers. It's like, mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh my God. Yeah, totally. Especially for the mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Holy moly. Mm-hmm. PW service worker, deep dive service working with Kyle Simpson. Oh my God, is this bro? Yeah, my friend.
Yeah. So those would be, if you don't know what I'm talking about, those would be 2 good courses to go take.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a checkpoint right now. You can go into your app, or our project here rather, React.hold.courses.
Okay, not quite sure, because here we're going to take a look at the server side. God damn. Server side rendering. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Server side rendering. Mm-hmm. Code splitting. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. It's like that, bro. Like the server side rendering. It is like that. Okay. Mm-hmm. Server side rendering. Mm-hmm. Server side rendering. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense why these are advanced topics here. Okay. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We're down in code splitting. So we're down here at code splitting, so you can see all the code up until.
Okay, but I don't think I have that. Do I have that? Not quite sure. Save, give me a second. Be right back. Okay, that's very very interesting. Mm. Oh my god, that's very 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 interesting. Hmm. That's very 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 interesting. Okay.
Till now.
I just want to double click here and then find a way to open this. I'm not sure if I have any of them. Front master here. It is under React. I don't think I have that. Code splitting checkpoint here. Let me see if I have that. Not sure if I do that. I don't think so. Yeah, this is from the other. Exactly. But this is the complete intro to this. Okay, I get it. Using hooks, React Query, control class component, every component, portals, and ref. There you go. Yeah, is this one. Okay, okay. Exactly. Is this the code splitting? Interesting. Okay. So let me actually clone this. So right now you're not able to see what I'm looking, but it's this. Okay, so what I'm doing is gonna clone this. Gonna clone this. And from there you're gonna do is then I'm gonna take a look at this. Yep, I trust the folder here. Let me git clone this. And there you got it. Okay. So open up here. Close this. Maximize this. And code splitting. That's right. Here in our entry point we got is this. This is spans for that. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, cool. That makes a lot of sense. Adapt that context, exactly, which is something that you inject here for that. And the context. Alright. So server-side rendering. Exactly, smart offline catching and PW features like push notification. This will be quite interesting, bro.
Here in code splitting, we are now going to do server-side rendering. We've done code splitting. Now what we want to do is whenever a user makes a request to our website, we don't want to just send them, bare HTML, which is what they receive up front, right? They receive this, and then their app goes and fetches app.js and style.css, we want to send them complete markup whenever the user makes the request, so that whenever they receive it, they get a complete vision of the site, and then they can basically start reading your site, start deciding what they want to do, and then hopefully by the time they make a decision about what they want to do, your app is now ready to be interacted with, right? So that what server-side rendering is going to do is it's going to reduce the time to first meaningful paint, right? It's going to increase the time to interactivity, which is bad, right? But the idea is first meaningful paint. Your app is now ready to be interacted with, right? So that what server-side rendering is going to do is it's going to reduce the time to first meaningful paint, right? It's going to increase the time to interactivity, which is bad, right? But the idea is you show the user something, they start understanding what you're showing them, and by the time they go to click on something, you'll have loaded all the JavaScript in the background, and they'll be able to do something about it, right? So picture like you're signing up on Netflix.com. The reason I'm picking this one is because I used to literally work on exactly this problem, right? You show them this, right? And by the time that the user reads the website, they're like, okay, I want to sign in, right? By the time that they think about it and click on sign in, you want the website to have been loaded by that point, right? That's what we're going to try and do right now. Now, what's really bad is if you show them something and by the time that they go click on something, it doesn't do anything, you played yourself, that's a bad idea, right? Now, what's really bad is if you show them something and by the time that they go click on something, it doesn't do anything, you played yourself, that's a bad idea, right? So you need to, again, this is something that's not a silver bullet, you got to keep your eye on the ball, you got to make sure that you're measuring your performance metrics to make sure that you are making a better experience, not making a worse experience. Because nothing will frustrate a user more than them trying to do something and it's like, oh, this is broken, and then they'll just bounce, right? So, let's go.
Okay.
Bare HTML, which is what they receive splitting. Until now, here in code splitting. We are now going to do server-side rendering. We've done code splitting. Now what we want to do is whenever a user makes a request to our website, we don't want to just send them...
Okay, exactly. So server-side rendering is that? Exactly. Whenever a user requests a website, we don't want to send in this particular case, what? Interesting. Wait, what? Apple Silicon. Okay. Whenever a user requests a website, we don't want to send,
bare HTML, which is what they receive up front, right? They receive this, and then their app goes and fetches app.js and style.css.
exactly, which is this. completely, because this is our development. Quite, not yet. Okay. So whenever a user requests a website, we don't want to send our file, our index. We don't want to send our HTML.
Bare HTML, which is what,
or bare HTML. We don't want to say our bare HTML, which is for development. Okay, like this, like this. Yep, like this. All right. That's right. So we don't want to send our bare HTML like this. Okay. But because of that, we want to send a markup ready, so the users can see immediately, and the search engine can crawl them, can crawl and rank them properly. Okay, that's the idea of this. That's the idea of this.
they receive up front, right? They receive this, and then their app goes and fetches app.js and style.css. We want to send them complete markup whenever the user makes the request, so that whenever they receive it, they get a complete vision of the site, and then there's they can basically start reading your site, start deciding what they want to do, and then hopefully by the time they make a decision about what they want to do, your app is now ready to be interacted with, right? So that what server-side rendering is going to do is it's going to reduce the time to first meaningful pain.
Okay. So what server side is gonna do, reduce the size of the initial render page.
Right? It's going to increase the time to interactivity, which is bad, right? But the idea is,
okay, and increase the time of interactivity. Okay.
you show the user something, they start understanding what you're showing them, and by the time they go to click on something, you'll have, loaded all the JavaScript in the back something. They start, but the idea is, you show the user something, they start understanding what you're showing them, and by the time they go to click on something, you'll have, loaded all the JavaScript in the background.
Okay. So the idea here is that by the time the user load that, because it's that, Why you don't want to move around here? Still be possible. Okay. You know what? All right. Much better. Way much better. Okay. Cool. Cool. Perfect. All right. Much better.
And they'll be able to do something about it. They start understanding what you're showing them, and by the time they go to click on something, but the idea is you show the user something, they start understanding what you're showing them, and by the time they go to click on something, you'll have, loaded all the JavaScript in the background,
Mm-hmm.
and they'll be able to do something about it. Right?
Okay.
So we have a checkpoint right now. Loaded all the JavaScript.
Okay. So the idea here is that the idea here is that you show something to the user, and by the time the user understands it, okay, you show something to the user, and by the time the user understands it, you load all of these things in the background. That makes a lot of sense.
JavaScript in the background, and they'll be able to do something about it, right? So.
Mm-hmm. And then they'll be able to do something with them. But that's the value proposition here. Okay.
Picture like you're signing up on Netflix.com. The reason why I'm picking this one is because I used to literally, and by the time and click on sign in, you want the website to have been loaded by that point, right? That's what we're going to try and do right now. Now, what's really bad is if you show them something, and by the time that they go click on something, it doesn't do anything, you played yourself, that's a bad idea, right? So you need to, again, this is something that's not a silver bullet. You got to keep your eye on the ball. You got to make sure that you're measuring your performance metrics to make sure that you are making a better experience, not making a worse experience. Because nothing will frustrate a user more than them trying to do something and it's like, oh, this is broken, and then they'll just bounce, right? So let's go.
So the idea here is to avoid that frustration. The idea here is to avoid frustration. So user frustration when navigating your app, except when navigating your app and bounce it. Mm-hmm.
Head to your application. We're going to make a new file here that is called client-app.jsx. So we're going to do server-side rendering. You can't do any DOM stuff in Node. I think that makes sense, right? You can't call window.alert because one, there's no window, and two, there's no alert. So you have to make sure that anything that interacts with the DOM is not loaded in Node, or else it breaks. So we're going to put all the
Exactly. So here we are going to create, that's where the pain comes from. Okay, so here we're going to create is a client.jx file. Okay, that where we don't want to define anything that is being used in the browser or the client, otherwise it'll broke.
note or the browsery stuff here in client app.jsx. So first thing we're going to do is import hydrate root from React DOM/client. We're going to import browser router because it's in the name. You can't load browser router in
on the server
Node, so that comes from React Router DOM. And then we're going to import app from app. Okay? And then here, we're just going to say hydrate root. We're going to tell it where to hydrate it, so document, get elements by ID, root. We're going to say browser router, app,
and the application.
and that's it.
Okay.
My notes there is incorrect, so that is it. So all we're doing is we're loading the app, we're loading browser router, we're doing everything that has to be done in the browser here in client app. Imagine if you had something like Google Analytics, you would do that here, right? Because you don't want to run analytics from the server, you want to run analytics from the browser, right? So anything like that, you're going to throw here in client app.jsx. Anything that's only going to happen in the browser and not going to happen on server-side renders. That goes here, okay? Go back to index.html. This is going to load client app, not app.jsx. So that's important. Okay, and then go to app.jsx. Get rid of browser router here. Don't load that. Delete that from your app here as well.
Because we already loading that.
Oh yeah, get rid of the React DOM import up here as well. Yes. So this one right here, the create root one, just get rid of that altogether. And then down here at the bottom, get rid of all this root.render stuff.
Because we're already doing that.
We're just going to say export
on
default
the client
app.
Exactly.
So far, so good. So we're making app now general purpose that it can be run either in Node or
in the server.
in the browser.
Either on Node or in the browser, exactly.
Now we need a server app.jsx.
Because we're making here the app.
So make another new file called server app.jsx. Okay, here we're going to say import render to pipeable stream from React DOM/server. Import static router from React routers DOM/server
Render to pipeable stream.
and import app from ./app. Okay, static router is basically React router that can be run in Node. That's all it is. So it's all the same machinations of like how to resolve routes, what route they're on, which one to send them to, navigation, all that kind of stuff. But it doesn't have all the stuff that ties into history, which is only in the browser.
Only
right?
the browser.
That's why we need static browser and not browser router. Render to pipeable stream is something that can only be run in Node. This is actually going to run our application, and it's going to run it into what's called a node stream, right? Which is basically like this thing that it'll progressively render your app, and it'll give your app progressive output so that when a user makes a request, we can slowly serve them pieces of information as they're available. The way that this used to work is we used to have to render the entire thing all at once and then send them complete HTML. Now with React Router, or serve them pieces of information as they're available. The way that this used to work is we used to have to render the entire thing all at once and then send them complete HTML. Now with React Router, or sorry, not with React Router, but with React 18 and Suspense, we can send them piece by piece. I guess it was React 17 that did that, but who's keeping track? Okay, we're going to export.
Is another you can send is streams of that. So back in the old days, you have to entirely render the entire markup and then send it. But now you can is with Suspense and code splitting is to send chunks of that.
As they're available. The way that this used to work is we used to have to render the entire thing all at once and then send them complete HTML. Now with React Router, or sorry, not with React Router, but with React 18 and Suspense, we can send them piece by piece. I guess it was React 17 that did that, but who's keeping track? Okay, we're going to export default a function called render, whatever you want to call it, URL and options. Okay, and then const stream equals render to pipeable stream, static router, location equals URL, and we have app.
Because these functions are going to handle those chunks of data that it's going to send. Okay, we're sending this chunk.
Okay, and then down here we just return stream. Now, what's cool about this and this approach, I didn't used to do it this way, I think this is much more elegant than the way I used to teach this, is we can now just we can just have Vite build server app.jsx, and then we can import what is built by Vite into Node. So we don't have to build our entire Node server, we just have to build server app, which then interfaces to our JSX, right? Because Node can't read JSX. That's the problem that we have here. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So now,
yeah, because Node can read JSX file, and luckily for us, now Vite is capable of doing that thanks to this plugin.
Now we can say, hey Vite, build this for me, and then in our Node application we can say import the built output. Your alternative is using something like Babel Node or something like that. It gets really janky pretty quickly. Okay, all that sounds good. Go into your package.json. We're going to go in here to your scripts, and we're going to add a couple more.
Which is server-side render.
So we're going to have two different builds. We're going to have build client, which is going to be Vite build --out dir /dist/client. And then we're going to have a build server, which is going to be Vite build out dir dist/server --ssr server app.jsx. Okay, and then when I have multiple build steps, I'll do something like npm run build client and npm run build server. To be super fair, this is not this. I don't think this works in Windows, so you'll have to do something else. Doesn't matter. We don't really have to build this. What would be more elegant is having like a make file that does all this stuff for you. But I'm definitely not teaching make today, or ever for that matter. But definitely not today.
Make file.
Okay. And then server. We're gonna have just node server.js, something like that. Or start, not server, just node start. npm run start will do our node server.js. One thing you do need to add to your package.json, please up here, just put type :module, because we're going to be doing modules in Node. It requires this type module for it to be okay with that. Okay. Getting closer. Please npm install express at 4.18.2. You might ask me, like, why don't I just do this in Next.js? You probably should. I'm showing you how to basically build Next.js, right? I'm showing you what Next.js does under the hood for you. And then after this course, hopefully when you either take Scott's course or something like that, you'll really value what Next is doing for you, because this is not necessarily always that fun to do, right? But what's cool, what I'm showing you here is that you don't have to use a framework that's React aware, right? We can build this in any node-based framework. So like when I work, to use a framework that's React aware, right? We can build this in any node-based framework. So like when I worked at Netflix, we were working with Fastify, right? Or Fastify? Restify. Restify is the one that Netflix uses.
Restify. Exactly, but you can do this on any. But you can do this on any. On any Node.js environment here. Okay. So that'll be all for this video. Take care. Bye bye.